Hey there, folks, and welcome back into the Northern Football Podcast. Ben Steiner alongside Brendan Dunlop and Alex Gongiruzik. Match week for the Canadian men's national team in LA, SoFi Stadium. Brendan, you're off to LA just briefly after this recording as well, but exciting. Canada taking on Mexico in the semifinal on Thursday night, and then hopefully the U.S. in a final. Could be Panama too. We've got some questions on that as well, but how are we feeling going into this week? There's been so much hype around this week, and it's finally here, Brendan.
Yeah, I'm excited, man. It still feels, pretty surreal that Canada are going into that venue that will very much be a Mexican home match. And for those players that didn't get to experience that in World Cup qualifying and haven't, a lot of those players haven't experienced anything quite like that at club level either. It's gonna be fantastic. It will feel like a final. It could be a final. And what's wild is that Canada are favored going into it. So I'm excited to finally get to Thursday, and then, as Jesse Marsch keeps saying on the players, then we can think about the weekend.
You got to win. Canada can't look past Thursday, and I guess that's the important outcome. I mean, that Mexico game is special if you think about it. I mean, just kind of the build-up this week's been interesting to see, like Canada training, at the LA Memorial Coliseum. Is it the official name where they won the Gold Cup? Kind of do some of the parallels there of having some legends around. The fact they beat Mexico on the way to that Gold Cup win, maybe there's a bit of parallel. They can beat Mexico on the way to this Gold Cup win. It's been also cool to see some of that build up because this Mexico game is going to be special. I was reviewing some of the tape from the last time they played Mexico, and you just remember how physical of a game it was. Fun fact, it was the most fouls in a game under Jesse Marsch by the opposing team. Part of that's also because Copa America, the bar for a foul was a little closer to murder, whereas maybe in a friendly it's a little lower, but still a sign of what kind of game this could be, and setting up what everyone hopes from a Canadian perspective would be a US-Canada final, although with CONCACAF you can never be too sure about anything.
And interesting as well, Jesse Marsch dropping most of his starting 11 in a media availability, speaking to reporters at the LA Memorial Coliseum, reported by friend of the show, Matthew Shinetti. Pretty solid starting 11. The starting back line is very much intact. He was coy on the goalkeeper. Still no tip on whether it's going to be Dane Sinclair or Max Crepeau, or maybe he throws a wild card in there and puts Tom McGill in the lineup. But how do you see this lineup coming out when we finally get a starting 11 an hour before the match, Brendan?
I think he's not uncertain of his wingers. Simple as that. I think as much as it was revealing his hand that we could kind of predict that those 7 players would be on the pitch. I love that he didn't give away early his goalkeepers, and the fact that I genuinely believe he doesn't know what to do on the wings, and perhaps in trying to find a partnership to get more out of Alphonso Davies offensively, at the same time maybe even protect him a little bit at the back. I think he doesn't know what it is yet. I think we all thought it could have been Ali Ahmed, but he hasn't quite lived up to his game or matched his own level, I should say. So I think that Marsch doesn't know yet, but that's a pretty good core. I think there's no surprises to the 7 that he did reveal.
Yeah, it does kind of make me go back to the summer when we were talking about, Liam Miller, Jacob Schaffelberg on that left side, and both were working brilliantly well on that left side. And Tasia Buchanan, for the start of it, had the right side, and then we adjusted from there. Richie Larea playing some of that, but Canada has depths in wide areas, but that depth is gone this time. So they're trying to answer a big question, especially on that left side. I think we all kind of figured that Buchanan's going to be back at the starting 11 on the right side, especially after starting for Villarreal against Real Madrid, where he ran around for most of the match, got one shot off, but didn't do too much effectively. But I still think it's going to be Ali Ahmed. He impressed me against FC Dallas, but again, that's a very different opponent than he's going to go up in Mexico, Alex.
What did Ali Ahmed do to you? I think, like, in this discussion, Ali Ahmed's the guy I'm looking at. He's the guy. If anything, Tajon Buchanan's been the one who has a little more to prove in this camp, has something, club level, be it at Inter Milan and now at Villarreal. It's not been easy to get minutes. And even for Canada, it's, kind of been, Ahmed has been the guy to step up on the wing along with Schaffelberg. But of course, Schaffelberg, I can't imagine is available for more than 30, 40. At least you maybe shouldn't ask him like, hey, welcome back. Go play Mexico for 90 minutes. You're going to get the crap kicked out of you. But no, I think for the wing, it's going to be Buchanan and Ahmed, and both have varying amounts to prove, and I think that'll be good for Buchanan in particular to have the confidence of going in, knowing he's going to start and just building. Because in the last window we saw glimpses, but at that time he was months, or not months, but weeks removed from coming back from a major injury. If anything, the big thing I am watching for here, based on Marsch's comments, based on what I've seen from Mexico, is that second midfielder spot, because that is genuinely wide open, like genuinely. Kone seems to be the favorite, but as we know with Kone, if you put him in, you're going to get more control on the ball. That's what he brings. But maybe defensively, you'll have some questions. Choinière could be an option now. He started this weekend. He played the 90. That was great to see. We know if he goes in, he'll press. He'll give you something a little more on that side of the game. Of course, Jonathan Osorio is also an option. He'll come in. He'll just bring experience, savvy. He's going to bring a bit of Concacaf. The wild card is Seager, because last week he was name dropped. Nico Seager. Could he play? The nice thing with Seager, he brings a bit of that defense. He's playing for Gennaro Gattuso. I'm sure he's learning all sorts of things in training every week. At the same time, he brings a little class on the ball. Ben knows from his youth sports days. Could Seager be a bit of the balance that Jesse Marsch needs in that midfield, that you get a little bit of what Kone would get, a little bit of what Choinière could get, a little bit what Osorio could get, all in one? Something I'm keeping an eye out for.
I know that Jesse Marsch wants to give Canadian guys opportunities to be in his rotation for the coaching staff, but it wasn't that long ago that Phil Neville was a part of a major tournament coaching staff for Canada. So I think that it would be great if Jesse Marsch got Gennaro Gattuso to join Canada for the Gold Cup, okay? Because I think we all can agree Nico Seager has a real opportunity to be the guy at the Gold Cup, and I would just love the opportunity to speak to Gennaro Gattuso and hear him talk about CONCACAF. That would also be absolutely brilliant. Alex, you said one thing that made me think about Schaffelberg and Ali Ahmed, and it's interesting because the two guys that can be electric, two guys that had a major impact and I think surprised a lot of people at Copa America, but two guys that you write the pros list and the cons list right now, and it's pretty even, and it's not as simple as one guy outweighs the other, because I think they both have limitations in different ways. I think the hesitation with Ali Ahmed, and this is something that Jesse Marsch has spoken about for months, is size. A physical game against Mexico. He's someone that will absolutely be targeted. So you're not going to get max Ali Ahmed in that situation, it would be the assumption, and you're not going to get maybe an hour. If you don't get an hour out of him, will you be able to get 30 minutes out of Schaffelberg? Doesn't seem that he can hit his speed mark, and he obviously isn't 100%. You could be exhausting him in 30 minutes. You might just be getting 80% or 72% of Jacob Schaffelberg. Is that enough in a match like this? One that's going to be a final, particularly one that's not decided in the final half an hour, and one where you're looking at someone to assist and aid Alphonso Davies, not the other way around. I think that's what makes that left side very, very tricky, as opposed to in the summer where we were looking at them both for their strong suits as opposed to comparing their weaknesses against each other.
Schaffelberg was interesting coming back into MLS play this weekend. Of course, I had nothing better to do on Sunday afternoon than watching Nashville play Philadelphia, and he comes in for 15 minutes at the end. And as Alex was saying, over the last few weeks, even just a short appearance from Schaffelberg can make a massive difference. Within 5 minutes, he had a chance right from the penalty spot, effectively pulled back, emptying the box. He was stopped by Andre Blake, Jamaica starter, of course, and Philadelphia Unions, but he's still that player that can make a significant impact even in a very short period of time. And
you're not going to get 75 minutes from Ali Ahmed. And if you start Schaffelberg, I don't think you get the most effective Schaffelberg in the first 60 minutes. That's what's tricky, right? I'm thinking about that midfield too, because it's like you can't use all three of them next to Eustáquio, right? But you kind of want to get, I think that there's a lot you can get out of each of them. And I kind of feel like maybe you do start Choinière, but then you decide whether Kone is more effective at halftime or at the hour mark, or whether it's Jonathan Osorio. And I kind of feel like I want Osorio there for the last half an hour, but perhaps not at the expense of those two guys. So I'm stuck in that spot.
Could you go 4-1-4-1 and get an extra midfielder out there to bring some of those players into the picture?
My assumption was using the left side. Using the left side in front of Davies, right? Because as we've discussed, if you can't get a combined 90 in what you think is a fair, manageable split out of Ali Ahmed and Jacob Schaffelberg, then is there a way to use that side of the pitch for Oso? Maybe Choinière? That's what I think, but I'm not sure.
You could also see one of the forwards dropped into that position if needed, right? Maybe Jonathan David, he's flexible. You throw him out wide. You bring on another big man up top, especially if you want to maybe, just change things up with Mexico. I think something that's also going to be important to watch is Mexico by design. They're going to sit back and they're going to muck things up. They've kind of made that clear. This Mexican team can press. I don't think they will, based on this. So that's also something for Canada if maybe they're struggling to get a bit of rhythm in the game. And Osorio comes in, like you mentioned, or that's Kone's music, right? Maybe a little more rhythm always screams a little Kone, but it definitely feels like Marsch is going to have to get creative with those winger spots if his wingers start to run out of juice and this game starts to turn and they need a little bit of something special.
I think that depth is like one of Canada's biggest advantages, right? And in the past, it's like they've struggled how to maximize their bench and with timing. I would say the last Nations League 2 years ago in Las Vegas, that was arguably one of the biggest faults of John Herdman was his timing with substitutions, his adapting live in the moment in the game was just not good enough. And how Jesse Marsch does that now with a stronger team than they had in Las Vegas 2 years ago, that's the challenge.
And from Guavadelic, is there a concern for the Canadian men's national team when it comes to depth at fullback, considering the amount of injuries there? Zoran Basong brought into the group with Richie Larea not there. But say a Canadian fullback goes down against Mexico, and you're looking at either a third place match or a final, regardless of which one, critical game in World Cup preparation. Who are you putting on a back line if one of those fullbacks goes down, Brendan?
The standout, right, is that we look at the other positions and all of a sudden it's deeper than ever before. Up front, especially, Jebison and Promise David are unproven internationally, and Jebison maybe not as proven as Promise David, at least not in the form right now. But you feel pretty comfortable with either of the four of them up front, or Tawny. And then midfield, we just discussed how deep the midfield, central midfield is right now. And it does stand out that the fullbacks, the crop is not as thick as it was. And, with Sam Adekubi and Richie Larea, sadly not as reliable, there's a worry ahead of 2026 for sure. I think that they would be looking at fullbacks on the brink that could step up. Basong is going to get the opportunity in this camp. We'll see going forward. But I would say that, it's one of the few spots on the team where you do have a bit of concern looking ahead to 2026 because you're banking on these aging bodies and aging legs to stay healthy and to stay on top form, Alex.
Yeah, but also fullbacks. I mean, isn't that like the running joke in international football that no team has fullbacks? And like other than France and like England, where like France is like, all right, like you got multiple world class guys battling at fullbacks. Like that's just a natural problem of football. If anything, Canada's pretty blessed in the fullback department, where like Alphonso Davies and Alistair Johnson, you put them up against a lot of top nations, let alone nations in CONCACAF. Yes, the depth is, a bit shored up, but especially right now, at the same time, I think you can find a way. Like, remember 2 years ago when the running joke was every Canadian seemed to be turned into a fullback?
Yeah.
A lot of guys, if needed, like the Seegers, the Ahmeds, etc. You can get creative. Jamie Knight-Labelle, I'm sure you could shift him out to fullback and just ask him to keep things simple. Maybe a bit of a back three out of possession. Of course, Joel Waterman, I'm sure, again, there'd be some comfortability there. Maybe he slots in the middle. You put one of Bombito right out wide. I think there's enough creative solutions at the position, and I think it's less of a worry just because that's international football, and the fullbacks, especially left-footed fullbacks, right? Isn't that like the thing how in modern football left-footed fullbacks are worth so much more than right-footed fullbacks? So the fact that Canada has Davies and Adekubi, principally not for this tournament. And again, I think with the short turnaround, you're not worried. Of course, that's something like you mentioned, Brendan, in the World Cup, especially if there's injuries. You do wonder, but for this tournament, I'm not too worried about the fullbacks.
And from Jackson Loy, who are the most informed and dangerous players on Mexico heading into the Nations League Finals? Three names that stood out to me: Johan Vasquez, center back in Serie A. He's going to be, violent against Canada. He completely shores up the center back situation for Mexico. But that means that Canada can attack out wide because there aren't necessarily those routes going down the middle, because Vasquez is probably one of the best center backs in CONCACAF outside of the two that are going to be wearing the red jerseys, is Moise Bombito and Derek Cornelius. And then up top, it's Jimenez for Mexico. Two strikers in great form, but as you say, Alex, probably not pressing.
Yeah, I think I'd probably echo Raul Jimenez is one. That's the fascinating one because he's had a real good season for Fulham, and the thing is with Santiago Jimenez, he's had an incredible season with Feyenoord and now AC Milan. He just doesn't do it in the Mexican shirt. 4 goals and 32 caps is jarring for a player of his quality. But it shows how he struggled. I'm curious to see what's the approach there. Like, it's Raul should get the look based on form and pedigree, but if Jimenez it clicks for him, Santiago, like with the form he's in for AC Milan, you back him. So definitely the forward situation. It's not easy questions for Aguirre to answer, but those are two very informed players. But otherwise, a lot of the Mexican players. I mean, I haven't been following Liga MX too closely, so I can't really say which of these guys are in the biggest form. But definitely, that familiarity, that experience is also gonna pay off. But the goalkeeper position again is one I highlighted last week, and I would continue to highlight. Like, that lack of experience there does stand out on the flip side in terms of maybe guys less informed. Although Luis Malagon, Club America, has been incredible for the last 2 years, and he's played a big role. He'll start, and maybe he can use that to his advantage.
Big shoes to fill, though, right? I mean, Ochoa is so beloved by the fan base. It's like so much pressure on a goalkeeper for a team with expectations like that he, was godlike, right? He is Gigi Buffon to Mexican football. And I think even towards the end, as it seemed like maybe he should have hung up the gloves a little earlier, a conversation that we've had in this country as well, there was a pass for him. So I think it's difficult on whoever it is that pulls it on the gloves. But I agree, Malagon stood out. Seems like he's reliable and maybe will be the goalkeeper of the future. It's going to be interesting to see how Mexico responds to, because it's different against the States, right? I think back to 2 years ago in Las Vegas, where Mexico were totally outplayed. They did not belong on the same pitch as that American team. And that seems surprising, even for us that have watched these individual American players grow into superstars at some of the biggest clubs in Europe. The American team hadn't looked like a unit like that to destabilize the power in the region, and Mexico just looked so broken. Now they're going into this game as the real legit underdogs, and it's not the States, it's Canada, who on paper I think they're aware are more dangerous in a lot of ways than this current American squad. So I'm interested to see how Mexico play and how they approach, because the fan base is going to expect them still to, they're looking at Mexico, Canada, thinking like this is 10 years ago, that Mexico should wipe the floor with Canada. And maybe there's one player to be afraid of. If that's not the case, we know that that's not actually the truth. So that place is going to be a cauldron, man. And I think the only thing I'm disappointed by, honestly, as I think about this, and I went to the barbers today, we were talking about the game, and he's getting excited, and then the excitement completely dips when he goes, "Yo, what time is that game on TSN?" I go, 10:30. He goes, "Bro, serious? Oh man." He's like, "I'm a night guy, and like I'm probably not getting a halftime." There you go. That's another opportunity lost to hook some casuals and some non-soccer fans. I mean, look, I get the timing. This tournament is not catering to Canadians. Concacaf didn't design the schedule based on that. It's you're looking at a part of the continent that's almost exclusively the southwestern United States, to get all the eyeballs and get the attention. But I do like that the game's on TSN. I do like that there's been some crossover we've seen already. To see KJ and Sinead back together on air is pretty awesome. And it's gonna be a good broadcast. It's just a shame that I don't think they're going to be able to hit the number that we would all love to see inside of their control because of the time.
Whoa, Brendan. I think Canadians on this side of the Rockies are going to be pretty happy with a 7:30 kick instead of like
Sure.
a 4 p.m. kick,
definitely,
where you're trying to fight after work just to get in front of a TV. So
I think that the population, though, of British Columbia is less than the GTA, excluding the city of Toronto. So that's the sad part. And I think that in general, as we've seen with American TV numbers, they do well on the West Coast, but it doesn't capture the whole country, and that's disappointing, because this is a game I want people to watch.
That leads right into our next question as well from Peekaboo. If Canada managed to make, well, what a username you've got on Blue Sky, by the way. If Canada managed to make the final against the US, and that's an enormous if, of course, where might it rank among Canadian sporting moments? Of course, that one is going to be earlier in the day. I think that's going to be a 6:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff. It's on a Sunday afternoon for West Coast and most of the country. that could rank pretty high, considering that it is on TSN, and I think you'll get sort of that sports bar feel of the country unifying around a team. The problem is nobody knows what this tournament is in the public sphere, and because it's on TSN so late, it's going to be one of those sort of channel flipping things. It's not necessarily appointment viewing, and you're not building up hype in the same way so quickly as you did for the Four Nations face-off, when everybody knew what was going on, and the instant it got a little bit enticing, that final was making record-breaking numbers. Could we see 4 million? Yeah, probably. Like, that would be a fantastic number for a final, but I don't think we're going to get to like a formative Canadian sporting moment with this tournament. That comes next year at the World Cup.
Well, maybe I underestimate the hockey crowd in the country, but like, you can't tell me a Nations League versus a Four Nations face-off. Like, it's, they fell in love with a Four Nations face-off. The Nations League just takes a few minutes to explain the history, to look at the history behind it. Yeah, it's not quite the Gold Cup, which actually people will know just because, over time enough people have heard it's like North America's version of the Euros or Copa America, that they at least know what the Gold Cup is. They just might not care as much about it. I do think, the people have shown that ultimately, if the sporting event is on and there's significance, they'll care. So I would throw out the idea that people aren't going to know what a Nations League is, because like, what the heck's a Four Nations face-off? How would you genuinely explain that in layman's terms to someone? Yeah, so the NHL just paused their league and like threw a bunch of guys from different countries into an exhibition tournament, but then they actually kind of gave a shit and started fighting each other, and so people started to care. Like, it was a made-up tournament.
Oh, young Alexander. I wish that there was like, I need a prop, like a, I don't know, if an NFP dad hat that I put on. Your argument was lost the second you said, here's how you have to explain it. And you explained it very well and very eloquently. The reality is it was longer than 2 words. And that's why the Four Nations face-off didn't need any more explanation other than the NHL's best players, Canada, USA. Conversation done. You didn't need to say anything else. And you had people watching. And you had record numbers in the States. But was it not the highest rated hockey game they've ever aired? Like, in today's market with cable cutting, that's insane.
I think it was second to the Panthers Oilers Stanley Cup final, which was a weird metric, but
okay, so then maybe they're only using like this now, the asterisks of this changed amalgamated metric system that has changed so much that maybe they're not actually comparing. But that's crazy. I think what's unfortunate is, and I just did this with the barber, soccer always requires the explanation. That's the hard part. Now we're explaining even to some soccer people what the Nations League is. Now, I'm not against it. And in fact, this is way better than the old system. They're way better than friendlies. And, Dwayne De Rosario had said before, he said in the book, he'd come home and he'd see people at the mall or he'd see someone at the barber and they'd be like, what are you doing here? Aren't you in the middle of the season? He goes, yeah, we're playing Jamaica at BMO. We're playing Curacao. And they're like, what? People that are actual friends of his are like, know him and follow his career and didn't know that Canada was playing because it was some friendly. I do love that the Nations League is a tournament, but the reality is we're still explaining to people. And when you explain to people that there's another tournament this summer, which is the Gold Cup, and maybe they remember 2000, or maybe they've heard of it, or maybe the Gold Cup's been explained to them as our equivalent of the Euros, then they're like, wait, what do you mean that's not as important as this right now? You said this was just created in 2021 or 2019 or whatever. So the tricky part is we're always having to explain soccer, and we have to explain the Nations League. But if they win this, then we won't. That's what happened to the Gold Cup in 2000. I feel like, you still have to explain it to some people. But if you were into soccer at all, even if you cheered for another nation internationally, you knew what the Gold Cup was because Canada won it in 2000. So that's what winning this Nations League will do.
Well, what I would push back against is that we'll have to explain for the semifinal, no doubt. Like, there's a lot of layers to it. Canada, Mexico, what's this tournament, etc. I don't think you're going to need much explanation for the final, because there you have the sell. Canada, US, final, Trump, you can add that in if you want. You can say World Cup next year. So this is kind of like, that's something the Four Nations face-off did well. It's like, guys, it's the Olympics next year. So this is like your teaser. You can do the same. World Cup next year. Prime time, Sunday. Like, I do think there are going to be reasons where if they make it to the Sunday, it's going to be fascinating to see how big it snowballs. Because I think that's maybe the point Peekaboo's making, that I think there is going to be a genuine, like, we talk about doors to accessibility. I think a lot of those doors are going to go down for a
Yeah.
potential final.
Do you think it will be tremendously bigger in the US? Like, for example, the Four Nations number. Was the Four Nations number actually bigger in the States than here? It's like 9 million down there.
Yeah.
What
Yeah, it was bigger in
we
the
did-
States than it was here.
Right. Surprising, right? I think you're going to have the same impact. And to Ben's point from a few weeks ago, like Ben's glee with Jon Stewart making CONCACAF jokes, you're going to get that. All the late shows are going to talk about Canada USA, especially if the States lose and if Trump's tweeting about it, right? So I think that's Canada soccer has never really been in a space like that, like a pop culture. Mind you, it isn't pop culture, of course, but like outside of soccer to get swept up in something that's very, very mainstream. That's really unique for particularly the men's program and this moment in time. And look, competition wise, I think we all want to see Canada USA, right? And with the trophy on the line, that'd be tremendous. The backdrop to everything that's going on politically will bring out more passion, but competitively, it would be a great game and a great test for Canada.
So who on the Canadian men's national team is doing the night show circuit, do you think? Who are the Kachuk brothers of the Canadian men's national team? In a positive sense, saying they win and maybe
I was going to say
go
that's not very Canadian to be going doing media tours after they lose. Heck, even if after they win, you might struggle to coax a few guys. I'm sure they'll reluctantly send out like Davies, I guess, as captain, or maybe
you can't
maybe
tell me Davies is turning down an opportunity to go in front of the cameras like that.
But if maybe Alistair Johnson ends up being an unsung hero in that regard, and like he loves to speak, he'll say good things. Maybe he'll be the perfect balance of just you go out. He kind of gives a bit of that, like, no nonsense, going to kill you on the field, but the nicest guy off it kind of vibe that would kind of fit the sort of Canadian image of this team.
The unique situation is, even though Alphonso Davies is without a doubt the best CONCACAF player and should be, and globally is the most recognizable CONCACAF player globally, he's not the most recognizable soccer player on this continent because of the population of the United States, and that Christian Pulisic has that title. So those guys being on the Canadian guys being on any American late night show are only going alongside Jesse Marsch, who will deflect to them and praise his players, but is undeniably going to be the talker and the speaker representing Canada and flying the flag.
Honorable mention to Moise Bombito. I just feel like he would embrace late night talk. Something about him.
That's a good show. I also, what I really like about Moise Bombito, and I don't know how he grew up, but he seems the same. And I should say that I don't understand everything he's saying in French, but there are very few guys that seem to have the exact same persona, comfort level, and ease in two languages. And I find that very refreshing, because when I see him weekly for Nice, he seems to have a lot to say. And when he gets a chance to speak in front of Canadian cameras in English, he seems exactly the same.
And from Derek, sarcasm. What if Canada meets Panama in the final rather than the U.S.? Would winning the Nations League mean less just because it wasn't against the U.S.? Alternatively, what if Canada meets the U.S. in a bronze medal match, which would be earlier on Sunday, noon Pacific, 3 Eastern? All scenarios that nobody wants to happen, but it wouldn't resonate as much. Like if Canada plays Panama in the final, you're not getting that same moment. And if Canada plays the US in a third place game, you're not getting that same moment either. You can still chalk it up to the soccer sickos. Yes, it's massively important preparation. Probably playing the US is still better preparation in terms of World Cup big picture than playing Panama in a final. But still, like, you're not going to get that same moment. It would definitely mean less if that's the way it plays out. We're all hoping for a Canada-US final here.
Ben wasn't born when Craig Forrest and Jason DeVos beat Colombia to win the CONCACAF Gold Cup, of which we had to explain to your generation and people for 2 decades why Colombia, who's not in CONCACAF, was in that tournament.
South Korea.
Yeah, South Korea was in as well. Well, and I just explained to the barber that Saudi Arabia is going to play in the Gold Cup. And he's like, yo, that's crazy. I see those Visit Saudi ads all the time. I'm like, well, maybe after seeing him play, maybe you're going to want to go. I think that for the sickos that will remember that Canada didn't get the chance to play against the States in the final, it will stand out. But for most people, and when we speak about it, it's not going to be with an asterisk. We will talk about the Canadian men's program winning a trophy again for the first time in 25 years. And I would say comparatively, it's kind of like the 1980 men's Olympic hockey team where the U.S. beat the Russians in the semis. And everyone feels like that we speak about that like that was a gold medal game, but it wasn't. They still had to go out and beat Finland in the gold medal game in Lake Placid. So that would cement having to play Panama would make triumphing over Mexico in the semis feel as big of a final as it really is.
Yeah, I think what changes is like if it's Canada US in a final, like that's going to be a potential like watershed moment, right? Like there's just going to be so much going on that it could balloon into something that win or lose, you're going to remember that game. It's going to be something like, wow, this kind of like it defines, right? Ahead of a World Cup, political tensions, yada yada yada. You can go on and on. With Panama, what happens if it's Canada Panama? If Canada wins, it's a just as important moment. Like, they finally get that trophy. They get the job done. They put that history behind them. This young generation kind of takes what they've felt they've deserved for a while. A lot of storylines, especially north of the border. Of course, there's going to be less noise below the border expected. But what happens if you lose to Panama? It just it's another big missed opportunity to capture that attention of people ahead of the World Cup of, oh, there you go, Canada again. No one even knew about this tournament. And if they don't win, less people are going to hear. Whereas if they win, people are like, oh, okay, Canada won a trophy. And like the US and Mexico are playing and like, okay, like they're the quote unquote kings of CONCACAF right now. Okay, we should really pay attention to this Canadian team. It's going to build momentum. So I think that's why for them, it's winning the trophy. But yes, of course, from a neutral perspective, from a narrative perspective, I'm sure if you're anyone who works in television, you want Canada-US final for reasons. But I don't think if it's not the US, it doesn't discount the importance of what this win could do for Canadian soccer on the men's side.
You're on mute, Brendan.
Last quick point, Ben. I think Canada losing to Panama in the final, if they get there on Sunday, it would be like when Man City lost to Chelsea in the Champions League final. Was it 2022? It was the first time Man City reached the final, and you just kind of felt like they were over. It was that they were the team of destiny. All they had to do was get through Chelsea, and they couldn't do it. Bayern Munich had one of those against Chelsea as well, albeit I think that 2012 team with Didier Drogba was a little bit better. For Americans, the Warriors and the Raptors, because the Warriors were injury depleted by the time they got to the final. But this is a team that had how many titles and had beaten LeBron. They were overwhelmingly expected to dismantle the Raptors, and they didn't do it. So I feel like it would be similar to that. But I don't think we'll be talking about that, boys. I think it's going to be a different narrative.
Well, it's certainly going to be exciting to see One Soccer working with TSN to broadcast these games as well. I was kind of hoping that on the sideline hits, we'd see KJ with the One Soccer mic and Matt Chinetti with the TSN mic, and you'd have that clashing. But it seems like they're going both with the TSN mics, which makes sense for the linear broadcast and the hopeful millions of Canadians tuning in. But maybe there's potentially opportunity for Alex down the road. Of course, Alex making his TV debut with One Soccer in the Champions Cup, and maybe the Whitecaps make a deep run there and potentially something between TSN or another broadcaster with One Soccer to get those games on TV as well. Another piece of news in CONCACAF Gold Cup draw details announced. That will be on April 10th at 7 p.m. Canada likely one of the seeded teams in Pot 1 along with the US, Mexico, and Panama. Pretty expected at this point, but nice to see Canada probably be one of those seeded teams, Brennan.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, we all expect Canada to be contending at the Gold Cup, regardless of what that roster looks like. And I think, you keep calling it sicko hour when we go deep into the weeds on things. I think that there's a lot of people that listen to the show that'll be very excited to see what that roster that includes players that you might have rated between 23 and 38 on the depth chart get into the team and potentially have a real impact and have the opportunity to make a name for themselves to be on the team in 18 months time, which is what quite a few players did in the 2023 Gold Cup and got to do through Copa last summer. So I'm excited for Gold Cup. This matters more. I've said before, this is the trophy that really matters. But if they don't win the Nations League, winning the Gold Cup would feel pretty nice, and there would be more motivation to do it, obviously. But this is one of the Gold Cups where I think I'm most looking forward to. In years past, you always hoped Canada would do okay, but now I expect them to perform very well, and I'm excited to see how they perform with whatever that team looks like.
I think one thing I'd hope for from a Canadian perspective is a good draw. Because I mean, and I say good draw. Last time, what we thought was a good draw wasn't a great draw, and I just say that because, like on paper, Cuba, Guadeloupe, and boy, it was Guatemala. Great draw to get through. We saw it. Canada didn't play great, and they got through pretty comfortably.
Mm-hmm.
But Canada, Guadeloupe didn't hit the same at BMO Field as it could have been if it was Canada, Jamaica, or Canada, Honduras, or something like that. So I do hope they get like a good draw, because that BC Place game could be a fun moment. It is a bit of a test run for the World Cup. If they got like Canada, Jamaica, Jamaica, the last few World Cups, they've sent some like pretty big guns. Like, could be a good matchup, and maybe something where you hope for them as a pot 2 team, and then you maybe hope to avoid like Saudi out of pot 4 and some of the harder teams that could pop up out of pot 3 and 4 to kind of balance that out.
That's all we've got for this episode of Northern Football, episode 220 of Northern Football here. You can catch us on YouTube on the 90th minute. You can catch us on whatever podcatcher that you prefer. Brendan is off to LA. I think Alex might be off to improv. I know you mentioned that you're doing that now. I will jump into that on another episode of Northern Football. But thanks so much for tuning in and enjoy the matches this week.